I don't think we'll be far beyond 2025 before like you could feasibly create any song you want and have it be novel lyrics and novel production and novel everything. And it's as good, if not better, than like anything a human can do. I don't think we're that far off.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. So excited to be here with you today. This is episode 295, and we're going to be looking into the future of the music industry, whipping out the crystal ball. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me is your other host, Circa. Cirque, are you ready to see the future, my friend?
Let's go, dude. I can't wait. Can't wait to make predictions to stake my reputation on.
I know. This is dangerous territory that we're going to be wading in. Maybe we'll get some heat for this. If you like what we talk about in this episode, let us know. It helps us get the podcast out there to more people. If you don't like what we talk about in this episode, also let us know, and maybe we'll read your review out on the show. That would be a ton of fun. But this is going to be a good one. I feel like this is something that would come up on the podcast in years past where we would predict things and we weren't so tactical, and that was often a thing. And now I'm happy to be doing another one of these. I think it'll be fun.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I mean, this company started off with like, I think a thesis as to like where the music industry could or would head, and hopefully an awareness, an above average awareness of where the music industry has been, which a lot of people don't know. And is continuing in that trend, is trying to see around the corner to where this is all headed.
Yeah, for sure. I want to kick us off with one that I think is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. It's certainly all over the news, a topic that you can't escape, and it won't let you escape. And it's AI. How is AI going to change, morph, mold the music industry in the next 10 years? I have some thoughts. I'm sure you do too, Cirque. What do you think, dude?
Got a lot of thoughts. Yeah, I actually just watched an AI podcast with Yosha Bach and Ben Gertzel. But yeah, man, it's happening so fast. And there's a future technologist who, if you're listening to this podcast, you never heard of, like, go watch his TED Talks from 20 years ago now, 10 years ago, and then look at all of his predictions from the 80s that have all come true in pretty much within a few months of when he said they would come true. Ray Kurzweil. Check him out. But, I've always been a fan of Ray Kurzweil and this future technology topic. And I was beating that drum in college in like 2010. I was like, dude, this is what's going to happen at this point. And people were like, you're crazy. And we're in that point right now. So that adds credence to and makes me a little bit fearful of how accurate the rest of the predictions are leading up to like the AI singularity. Like, it's going to happen pretty rapidly, it seems.
Yeah, for sure. I think a helpful framework that I've been thinking about AI within when it comes to any industry, but especially our industry, the music industry, when the question comes up is like, how is AI going to shake things up? Is it going to, remove your producer? Is it going to remove you as a singer, as a songwriter, whatever? The question that I immediately go to, rather than trying to answer it, is I follow up with a question. It's like, well, what is it doing right now in this moment? Because if that's what's happening, a year since ChatGPT launched, not that ChatGPT was the AI, but it was the, most publicly adopted iteration of an AI platform rapidly. I ask myself, well, what's being done right now? Like, what are we doing day to day? And I can tell you, like, I'm using AI for copywriting. I'm using AI for helping me craft, one-to-one messaging with potential clients, prospects. I'm using AI for a little bit of video editing, maybe for some of this podcast,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not personally doing that, but I know that we are. We're using AI for video editing for some of our clients from time to time, experimenting with that. I've been experimenting with Photoshop's generative fill, which is insane.
So good.
Yeah, if you haven't played with that yet, it's nuts. It's actually so good
So
that it
good.
bricked my computer for a morning.
Need better chips.
Yeah, my computer just shut off. That was something. Yeah, I think about all these different ways that it's being used in my life just as a music marketer here at Indepreneur. And I can only imagine, how far it's reaching into other areas of creativity. I'm not personally using it in music creation, although I have dabbled in a little bit of lyric writing with ChatGPT just for fun. Actually, I'll link in the show notes to a really super creative dude, this guy Tom McGovern, a friend of mine, who does ChatGPT videos, music videos, where he has ChatGPT write a song and they go viral all the time. He's super funny. I'll link to one of his videos in the show notes because he's just hilarious and a good example of someone who's using this type of technology in a creative way and not being afraid of it, which I think is great. But yeah, that's like the big question that I ask myself when it comes to like, well, where are we going? It's like, all right, well, where are we right now? Because it's only going to continue to go in those directions and beyond.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's important we categorize that ChatGPT is it's just a transformer-based large language model, which is a type of artificial intelligence. And it's surprising to most AI scientists the extent of the capabilities you get from large language models. Like a lot of the things that even really advanced AI scientists would have predicted would be a limitation of a large language model. Turns out it can do that too. And, when people think about AGI, general intelligence, they think about all these different things the human brain does that like clearly just something that's like an advanced autocorrect couldn't possibly do these things. But then it does. So it's a very brute force, like surprising way of achieving intelligence. And so literally this past week, we licensed a training that's no longer out called Launch and Release about crowdfunding. And we licensed it from the original creator, but it didn't come with lesson text underneath the videos for people who like to read instead. And so use ChatGPT to transcribe the video, each video lesson, and then write a lesson summary in text from that script, which is pretty intense when you consider all the ums and like timestamps that it was reading through to get that summary. It's insane. But also it's important to realize that like a lot of the responses to like, well, how's AI going to change this industry? Like 99.9% of the takes I've heard on this just sound like cope. Like it's a lot of cope. It's a lot of coping. Like it's a lot of people being like, well, we'll be able to do this. And like, that's just not categorically is not true. Whatever you think it's not going to be able to do, like chances are probably already can do it or is not far off.
This is where I said we might catch heat.
Yeah, this might turn you off, but like,
sorry.
Don't worry. Like, I seem to be a reasonably happy person, right? And I walk around with that opinion all the time that like these responses are cope and like it's going to move a lot faster than you think it will. But it's not all bad. But just to say that like our former web developer, Andrew, he put out, shout outs, dropout, he put out a video on social where he was going over a drum and bass song created entirely by a transformer model. And it's really good. It's really good. And so like the reason it's important to know a little bit of the technical stuff behind this is that ultimately, you'd think like, oh, this is just an advanced autocorrect. It just can predict the next token or the next bit of language given a prompt. What's the big deal? It's like, yeah, well, everything's language. Like music can be re-encoded as language. Video frames can be re-encoded as language. Certainly images, we've seen that with Stable Diffusion. The fact that like ChatGPT was one of the key components, or large language models were one of the key components that made this like Midjourney and DALL-E like image creation possible, along with a novel concept of like just let's modify like a random noise pattern down until it starts like looking like the image we want it to. I say all that to say that like, what's AI coming for first? What's the things that are going to be easy to replace? And it tends, I think, trends along the lines of what was digitized first in the computer and internet revolution. So you'll notice that like the first thing to go was documents. No longer did we need paper. We could put documents on a computer. We could pull them up. We could send them over the internet. Then it was images. And then it was music could be made into a digital file content type. And then it was video.
Video.
Okay, so you see this trend here. These are going to be the easiest things to replace. Why? Because they're already a digital content type. There's already there's a library, a huge data set of examples for an AI to train on. So anything that was like really quick to be digitized and turned into a content type or a file type, it's probably going to be the first thing that AI can do really, really well. And that obviously includes music. So my prediction for what it already can do is it can produce songs like better than most, like 99.9% of producers.
No, dude, definitely not.
Definitely not. I mean, I've heard the examples. They're nuts. And then on top of that, you can't go to a producer, pay them $0 or roughly $0, and then boss them around about every little part you want to be this way. But you can with an AI. It's far preferable to a producer kind of already. And then all the components are there. With the current AI models, we can replicate any voice almost to a certain degree of fidelity.
Yeah, we've been seeing those like AI recreations of songs or AI cover songs where it's like, this is Drake covering.
People like the AI Drake better than Drake.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for us to take stock of like, that's where we're at now. This is after 2 years of real development into the transformer model breakthrough that happened in like 2020, 2021. So what do the next 5 years look like? Probably double the speed of that. I don't think we'll be far beyond 2025 before like you could feasibly create any song you want and have it be novel lyrics and novel production and novel everything. And it's as good, if not better, than like anything a human can do. I don't think we're that far off.
It's pretty wild to think about 5 years time.
Yeah.
5 years into our 10-year stretch here. I want to touch on something, not to get too deep or philosophical in the weeds about this, but I remember years ago, you and I were having a random conversation about language and how language is universal and how in so many ways it's like the key to civilization and human interaction and just the way that we live and be in the world. And it's so interesting that now we're talking about language-based AI models and what their capabilities have been and how their capabilities have expanded beyond what theorists and technicians thought they would.
Yeah.
And even your description of like, this is what Midjourney did with being able to take images and boil them down to words to recreate different images. It's wild to think about how that's all based around language.
I don't want to get too far afield here, but I watch a lot of nerdy podcasts. And one of them is this great podcast called Theories of Everything with Kurt Mungle. Shout out. And when you think of a theory of everything, you think like, well, it's probably physics-based or quantum physics-based. It's about space and the universe and all that. But there are some really smart people who start their theory of everything from language. Because they say, well, you observed these things about the universe, but they came into your head as language. The observations did. And you talk about them with language. And so language is actually fundamental. Below all that is actual language. Like all you know is language. Everything that you've ever experienced is language. And so they begin their theory of everything with semantics, grammar. And it's really like super hard to wrap your head around when you're like used to listening to people about like gravity and shit. And then all of a sudden you talk about, well, semantics are actually the root of all existence. It's like, what?
I hesitated to even bring this up because I was like, I know this is something that you and I have talked about, but I'm a little hesitant to mention it here.
Well, it's just important, I guess, like, why would you need to know what I just said? You need to know it because it's important for you to comprehend how much of a breakthrough large language models are, because it's possible that all there is language.
Yeah. Do you think we sufficiently have covered the AI topic?
Totally. Yeah. I just think, be weary out there of like cheese dick podcast hosts like myself with copy arguments as to like, well, AI will never be able to, if any sentence that starts out with AI will never be able to, you can just bet all of your net worth on it being able to do that thing. You know,
Here comes the heat.
it's important for you to form your worldview and your plans for the future around that probability. I think like if you can just accept into your heart that like, yeah, probably very near term AI is going to be a better rapper than me or a better singer than me or a better guitar player than me. Like, okay, well then what? Then we can start to talk about then what.
Most people are better guitar players than me. So
yeah, that one's an easy one for me. But I think that you begin to fear like, well, if that's true, then there's not a place for me and it's all doom and gloom. And it's like, not necessarily, especially if you're one of the only people, the rare people in the world who aren't going to cope about it. If you can actually accept it, you have a huge advantage.
That's what I've been saying from the beginning. Well, not the beginning, but you know what I mean. Not the very beginning. But
yeah,
the sooner you go with the flow and don't resist so much.
Yeah, if you can just not.
Believe me, I was someone who, like, when I used Jasper, an AI copywriting tool, often. And I was someone who was like not really for it in the beginning. I was like, nah, I can write better copy than this. Now I'm like, no, I can write way better copy with this. It's not then, it's with. For me,
Right.
At least right now. And I can do it way faster, which for me is a net benefit in so many ways. I don't want to be sitting at my keyboard all day, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a race to survive whatever AI like obsoletes, right? There's a race. You're in it with all the other humans who are worried it's going to obsolete this thing. How do you jump out ahead of the pack right now? Except that it probably will obsolete it. That's one. You'll be ahead of 99.9% of everyone who thinks about this topic. Number two, now that you are unafraid of it because you have admitted to yourself that it probably will have these capabilities and it probably will be better and there probably isn't a secret back door to this argument. Okay, now how can you begin to use it? That's what Jack did, right? He stopped coping and he said, how can I use this to make myself more effective? It's okay if I didn't write the words. I don't need the ego boost of like, oh, I wrote it with a quill and ink. Like, so change your mindset around what productivity is like, because you don't have to farm the beans and then roast them yourself and then like grind them and all that shit to make a good cup of coffee,
Yeah, 100%. Acceptance and adoption is like what gets you ahead of 99% of people. 100%. And like, I feel like it's worth saying here is like the stuff we're saying goes beyond like normies, you know? This isn't like...
It's a very unnormy discussion so far.
Yeah. We're not really normie type of dudes, but this isn't going to be the stuff that like, you're not going to run into somebody on the street and probably bring this up and be like, hey, like accept and adopt the AI is going to do better at your job than you. Most people aren't even thinking about it. And that's what's crazy.
Yeah. Just remember these words to fight off copy bystanders and friends. Just say, it's over, man. When they feed you cope, when they're like, oh, but it's like blah, 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 blah. It'd be like, dude, it's over.
I love this topic. I got into it with one of my buddies the other day who's a teacher, and I love him to death. He's my best friend, but he was like, I hate ChatGPT. I don't care about AI. And I'm like, bro, how often do you have to write stupid emails to parents that are bitching to you about something that you don't really care about, that you just want to leave at the end of the day? And he's like, no, like... And I was like, you could use ChatGPT to make those emails way faster. And he's like, no, the personalization. And I was like, no, dude, it's done. It's over.
It's over. And also one last thing to hopefully make you comfortable. We carry around this highly powerful computer that is networked to the entire world's knowledge. And we don't think of it as something that is artificially augmenting our intelligence, even though we're all far more intelligent on like a knowledge basis because we have it. We don't consider it part of our identity. But I'm the first to line up and say, put this right here. Extend my prefrontal cortex.
Dirk's been saying that since the day I met you. You've been saying that.
Shoot it into my head, okay? And the reason is that like I want to adopt these capabilities. I am myself, even with my phone. I'll be myself when my phone's in my head as well, I feel. And so I want to be first at the front lines to incorporate these capabilities into who I am and what I can do. And if you can adopt a similar mindset, I think you'll find you're not so afraid of these advancements. You'll be more excited for them.
Dude, every time I'm on so many AI email marketing lists, newsletters and stuff, I love it.
Yeah.
I'm immersed in it. I love it so much. It's so interesting. In so many ways, it feels like I'm just like, as a marketer, it feels like I'm discovering digital marketing again. It's really, really fun.
That's sick.
Yeah, super, super cool. All right, we've covered AI.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about that enough. What's next? What else is going on in the next 10 years of the music industry? I have thoughts about licensing. I have thoughts about IP. Pick one.
Let's talk about the IP bubble, which, to give you guys some context, in 2020, when the COVID pandemic happened, the government's response was to immediately cut the interest rates on federal funds to zero. What that does is it makes it very cheap to borrow money, and that has the effect of increasing the amount of money out there, which is why we now have inflation. So the dollar's value is decreasing. When the interest rate is at zero, the dollar's value is decreasing. That's what causes inflation to go up. Okay, when the dollar's value decreases, people who have lots of dollars, they want to find assets to shove those dollars into to hopefully maintain their purchasing power. And that's why stocks went up and crypto went up and fine art went up and housing went up and used cars went up and everything went up, including intellectual property. Rich people ran out of NFTs to buy, and they started buying music catalogs at high valuations. Goldman Sachs put out a letter saying like the music industry is going to be worth this much in this time frame. And there was this speculative bubble around music. And one such man, Mercalarius or whatever, Mercalarius, he created Hypnosis Songs Fund and Hypnosis Songs Capital and a bunch of other spinoffs, and got money from investors, typically high net worth individuals, and just funneled it into music intellectual property and bought up tons of legacy IP. And so did tons of other people. Like this became a trend. The new speculative bubble was music rights, song catalogs.
Yeah, you can think about Bieber sold his catalog, right?
Yeah, I think Beyonce did.
Bunch of people.
And they were right to do so because the valuations were sky high. If all of a sudden a house that you bought for $500K, someone tells you, oh, this is actually worth $2 million, like you're a genius if you sell because you know it's actually worth the $500K you bought it for last year. So, those artists are brilliant for doing so. But that's just to say that like the Fed started raising interest rates in late 2021, which is the opposite of what happened in COVID. It makes money harder to borrow. It reduces the amount of cash. It strengthens the dollar, and it weakens risk assets like stocks, crypto, and yes, Bob Dylan's catalog.
It sure does. It sure does.
And so I made this call on our YouTube channel about a year ago, but I was basically saying like all of these things are going to blow up. And so that's what's happening today. Hypnosis Songs Fund is writing down its estimates for income from its catalog. So like a little bit of cold water being splashed on them. Pretty much every music investment fund is writing down their expected income, and the investments are being written down. And what that essentially means is that they've woken up to the fact that like music catalogs are not going to grow in value, annual value by 5x, like over the next 5 years. Like it's just not going to happen. Music becomes cheaper, not more expensive. So my prediction is that the IP bubble will burst. Hypnosis Songs Fund will either go bankrupt. I mean, they have BlackRock behind them, so I don't know if they go bankrupt, but the stock is not going to do well. And Sony's investment into Bob Dylan is going to end up being a shitty one. And pretty much all the valuations at which song catalogs were bought over the last 4 years will be proven to be way too high.
I feel like the writing on the wall was there for this, like, right when we started hearing about it, Yeah. Like, as soon as it started to become, like, week after week, news article after news article that this was happening, it was kind of like, I don't know about this. This isn't going to last. Like, these artists are basically cashing out. And like you said, you can't really blame them. Like, it was just a speculative period for them to take advantage of.
They're brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The long-term trajectory of it within the next 10 years is not good.
Now, I will say, though, during the everything bubble of 2021, it was made clear to the investing public that these were another pet rock they could gamble on. And that means that the next time the Fed cuts interest rates rapidly and we get another free money period, they very well could do the same thing all over again. So I am of the opinion that those valuations are overvalued and that a lot of these companies are going to go completely bankrupt. And right now, hypnosis has like halted all dividends to investors because, yeah, they were like, oh, weird. Our U.S. music royalty expectations are not panning out how we thought they would.
You don't say.
Yeah. So, but that, it's like you can imagine this last 4 years was like the investing public figured out that song catalogs could be like gold, where we could invest into it in certain times, in certain contexts, and hope to see a price appreciation. And that'll probably continue cyclically. I think this is a high water mark for the music industry.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious of your thoughts on what that will mean for intellectual property as a whole. We talked a few months back, kind of on our blockchain series that we did, about that topic a bit and the future of intellectual property. I'm curious your thoughts, given this sort of sector of it, what you think the next 10 years will look like when it comes to IP, blockchain, how that's changed since we last talked about it.
Yeah, I think IP goes to zero. I think it's so over.
I wasn't actually wondering. I knew that's what you. I just wanted to hear you say it.
Just because, like, already humans are creating like something on the order of 100,000 times more intellectual property per day than they did in an entire year 40 years ago. So there's just so much of it. And then there is no enforcement regime to make sure it's all protected. The U.S. courts could not handle every IP right being defended. It just can't happen. And then we're about to 100x that with AI.
It's wild.
So the whole meaning of intellectual property is going to become silly. The whole idea will become silly in short order, I imagine. Sorry. I don't think it's going to be around for much longer.
No. We'll have to link in the show notes about the blockchain series that we did back in the winter, I think it was, when we did that series where we talked about intellectual property, blockchain, how it all ties in together, takes you a little bit further beyond just cryptocurrency. So if you guys haven't heard those, there's some good episodes. We get really, really nerdy in those. But yeah, that's a good take. I agree. I'm pretty curious to see where it all goes in the next 10.
Yeah. Either it obsoletes because, it loses all meaning when AI can spin up like 100 new works per millisecond that are like on the same order and quality as like the great historical works. But so either it loses all meaning or it just becomes entirely unenforceable. Yeah,
for sure. It's interesting. And this was going to be a larger point that I was going to bring up, but now it's kind of a perfect time to mention it is, sync licensing in music has gone mostly the way of micro sync. Sync having licenses that are going to shorter form content, especially as shorter form content has become more and more popular. Micro sync has gone out to YouTube and to YouTubers and creators on those platforms, as opposed to like the Cadillac commercials, and that's it. But I'm wondering, given all of this, like we're probably going to see, while that specific phenomenon I think is going to continue into, the next 5 years. It's interesting, and you brought this up before we were rolling, that with AI, when are we going to see even that busted up as companies who already don't want to pay for music licensing have an opportunity to just create their own stuff at the push of a button and, forego having to license anything ever?
I was watching a movie the other day with my wife, and a song came on during a montage that was just so transparently and obviously the film company wanted to license Mr. Blue Sky, but couldn't pay for the rights.
I love when that happens.
Same tempo. And I've gotten pitch briefs for this before where they're like, we want this song, but different, obviously.
Yeah.
And I've written for those.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just going to become suicidal to license music if you're a music supervisor or even a producer of a film or a commercial. If you're the producer, you're responsible for the budget. You're responsible for allocating money. And all that budget can go elsewhere once like you have like name what you want. Music supervisor, just say it. Just say what you want. Okay, here you go. You know?
To give you guys a primer on sync licensing and music licensing in general, go back to the episode that we did on the evolution of sync with Mark Eckert, a friend of ours who is a brilliant producer and also a professional in sync licensing and publishing. We did an episode with him. We'll link to it in the show notes so you can listen to that. But it's interesting. I would love to actually chat with him again sometime and just go through the thought experiment here that you and I are talking about. I'd be very curious to hear what his thoughts on it are.
Yeah, I think like I just think because of AI, sync license and because of intellectual property becoming sort of a ridiculous concept over time, like licensing is probably going to become a $0 industry. The same as like licensing a song will be the same cost as like a visitor coming to your website.
It's true. That's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about AI and the variety of digital assets that it can interrupt or will interrupt, going from text to images to audio to video. But we didn't talk about code, and we didn't talk about the implications that will have on software, which is a point that you brought up in the next 10 years. Do you think most music software companies are going to go the way of the buffalo?
Yeah. Well, when the industry that you service just plummets in annual revenue and value, then it's hard to build a software tool for that industry. That's been true for the past 20 years. And despite that, people still seem to want to do it. But yeah, I just think software tools that are targeted at the music industry, and this includes things like Spotify, but it also includes things like, I don't want to name anyone specifically, but like tools that like, man, I can't do it without anyone specifically.
Are you thinking of marketing tools?
Marketing tools. That's right. There you go. Marketing tools for music.
Music specific marketing tools.
For sure. Like definitely going to zero. They'll die.
What do you think about music software as far as production? And I don't know if that falls into the same death sentence.
I think music production becomes ambient, just like the internet is ambient. Like, hey, your refrigerator's got a computer. What song do you want your refrigerator to give you?
Maybe. You might be right. I wonder how integrated, if the Avids and the Steinbergs and Apple.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Apple is Apple. So if they can integrate fast enough, then they may be spared.
Well, it's like the speed of integration will also become a non-human quantity.
Yeah, that's true.
We reach a point eventually, probably in the next 10 years at some point, where everything goes ambient. Everything technological goes ambient just because it'll be like water. I know that's a weird concept to bring up, but
I'm kind of not mad about it, honestly.
I think it's going to be sick.
I know what you were saying more so about the music related softwares, the Spotify's, I'm trying to think of a good one to pick on without hurting anyone's feelings. Like, a lot of people love you, Bandzoogle, but like you might go the way of the buffalo.
Right. Yeah.
I just picked a random one out of my head. I don't have any bone to pick with Bandzoogle on this episode specifically.
Like right now, it's just a lack of motivation. That is the reason why you cannot go to your Chat GPT interface and be like, all right, file with all my band's stuff in it. It's our press stuff. It's our music. Here it is. Here's our logo. Here's some photos of us. I need a website that sells these products. I also need you to source those products. And then just being able to do that all from a simple prompt-based interface is probably not far away. But then you got to think about the end user. It's probably not far away for them either. So the relationship between business and consumer, I think, fundamentally shifts over the next 10 years. And so, yeah, like I just think that like specific software tools and even software as a service as a whole takes a huge hit.
Yeah.
It's kind of trivial for a large language model to just spit this stuff out at you, given enough capabilities.
Well, we talked about what the music production software companies could do to integrate fast enough and maybe stay ahead of the red wave of death. But what about Spotify?
Spotify is currently not profitable, despite the fact that like its vendors are the only profitable people in the whole industry. Its vendors being major record labels. Like major record labels, despite being like shitty assholes, they make all the money. They make all the money in the music industry because ultimately they have gone for a quantity over quality approach to everything. And so by owning the entire history of recorded music, all the IP, and having insane negotiation power because of it, you know, the world's their oyster. And all the major record labels are initial investors into Spotify. And Spotify doesn't turn a profit. And it's not really meant to. It's sort of like a way to save their profits. I don't care who you are, you can't be an unprofitable company forever. Eventually, there's going to be some kind of economic downturn that liquidates you because you operate entirely off of debt.
Yeah.
You cannot live entirely off of debt forever. Eventually, there will be a major financial crisis that like, oh, sorry, no more debt.
These are lessons learned quickly from a crypto winter.
For sure. Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, literally, like, what is that Warren Buffett quote? When the tide goes out, you can see who's not wearing swimming trunks, right?
Yeah,
Some shit
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And I think that's going to happen to Spotify. I think it's definitely going to happen to Patreon as well. Patreon is a highly leveraged company with an insane valuation. At one point, it was $4 billion was the valuation of Patreon. And Jack Conte's not like, he's not fucking Mark Cuban. Like he's like Elon Musk. He's like
Yeah,
a musician. And he's like, there's been reports from that company, like ever since its inception, that he's an inadequate leader. Yet all these VC firms are just funneling cash to him in the form of debt. And they're all writing down their investments. And they've had a Series F round at a $4 billion valuation. And all those people are like, oh, I FOMO'd in. FOMO'd into the top. So yeah, like I think a lot of these software as a service and music tech companies go bankrupt eventually, or get sold off at a much lower valuation than they raised at. And I think that things like Ableton, I think it's much more preferable to have a artificial intelligence assistant that you can tell to do all of the things you need to do instead of learning all of the processes and the menus and the dials and everything you need to learn and then executing it in real slow ass time. When you just tell a large language model, like, I need a hip hop song, sort of 2005 era, like sounds like it could have been produced for Young Money in that era. And then they give it to you and you're like, no, I want this BPM actually. And then they spit it back out. And they're like, actually, can you do it in this scale? Cool. That synth, I don't like it.
Give me a Dilla snare.
Right. Like, there's no way you're going to want to use Ableton when that's the case. Like,
For sure.
And so, yeah, I think that it's not long for this world for those kinds of companies as well. As much as I love Ableton, shout outs.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'm curious to see what kind of changes Spotify could or will make before going under.
Well, they're already starting to, right? So for the longest time, we couldn't communicate with fans through Spotify. That's still the case, but we also couldn't add links that we wanted to or sell merch on the platform. That's changed.
Now we can. Yeah.
Ticketing, that's coming in. Monetizing curation has already happened. They've monetized their one competitive advantage, which was the recommendation engine. And now we have discovery mode and it's monetized. It's this thing called, I saw it in a YouTube video recently, and shitification. Where software platforms like get a little bit long in the tooth and they start making all these changes in a desperate attempt to like retain or bring back users. And that's like pretty much like, that's like in a movie when someone coughs and there's blood in the napkin. Like that's that moment.
How many times have we thought about Facebook in that way in the last 10 years?
Not me, dude. Not me.
No? You haven't been an ads manager enough, dude.
I've just always said that Zuckerberg is a beast of a CEO. Like, people don't realize like how rare it is to stay on as the CEO after being the initial technology forward founder.
That's true.
He's a reptile, dude. He's not gonna go quietly into that good night. Like, he's an insane alien of a human being, and people faded him like for the longest time because they didn't like his face or whatever. But I just think he's a monster, and I don't think Facebook is going anywhere.
No, I don't either. At this point, depending on what side of the aisle you sit on or what temperament you have about the things we've talked about so far in this episode, you might be feeling very defeated, you might be feeling excited, or you might be thinking like, you know, what the hell did those guys just say? I think the last point that I want to touch on maybe will be a little more encouraging to you, and maybe will make you feel like you have some semblance of control. And I hope that it does. And I hope that it inspires you. And that's about the shifting role of artists. And Circa and I talked about this like 2 years ago on this podcast. And we'll link to that episode too, because it was really fun. It was the first time that Circa and I talked about his band. Specifically, we talked about the shifting state of artists or musicians, creatives, from being, you know, the artisans that are making their thing to being more like public figures. And I think, if anything, the last 2 years since we recorded that episode has shown that that's continuing to be the trend. And I agree and think that it will continue to be the trend into the next decade, more and more and more, and that you should embrace that if you're a creative person.
Yeah, I don't want to leave you with a defeated mentality, because I think that's why people resist everything we've said so much. Is it's cope. Like, they don't want to feel uncertain about the future, and so they will wave off AI as like, oh, it'll never be Nick Cave or whatever. But if you can accept it, then how are you supposed to like feel good about your future as a creative person? How are you supposed to feel good about your future as just a human being who needs to make a living? And I'll give you a few copey, non-cope rationales for that. One is that a friend of mine, Kaylin Ellis, is a pretty famous producer, and I've known him since college days, and he blew up, and part of his push has been what? Daily content, daily short form content. He will make a beat per day, and then he will film a video of it and put it up on Instagram. And he's done that for years now. And it's done very, very well for him. And we asked him the secret of like, how are your videos go so well? And he was like, just look cool. Just look cool. People just want to see you looking cool. Just make a video where you look cool. And it'll do. And it was surprising to hear that from him, because he's not like he doesn't give off the vibe that he would just say like, just look cool, man. But he said that.
He's not Mr. Cool Guy.
No, he's like a pretty down to earth dude. But he's like, just look cool. Like, people just want you to look cool. And I thought about that a lot recently, because ultimately humans just want to, like, why do we follow anyone? It's because we just want to see other humans being cool. Like, we just want to feel like they're cool, and I identify with them in this way, which might mean I'm a little cool. And it's a very human thing. And there's a reason why, you know, all the people who watch chess before a computer became the best chess player still watch it. And they watch humans do it, even though there's no human who will beat a chess AI. There's a reason that people still watch Heads Up Poker, despite the fact that that was usurped by AI. It's because they just want to see humans being good at these things. And it's not like a niche market either. Like, it's part of the whole appeal. And so there will still be an opportunity for humans to look cool, to impress other humans far into the future, I think. And the degree to which you can put the phone in your neocortex is going to play a large role in determining how well you compete. So if you can adopt these technologies and make them part of your workflow and find out what's cool about them, and then be the one who brings that capability to the rest of us humans, that matters. That's going to be a big part of what cements your relevance in the future. But I'll just say that, like, being a personality is not going to go away. And AI can replicate the most charismatic human. AI can spin up some Riz, but it's all based on the most charismatic human. It's not some superhuman level of charisma. And so being a charismatic human being publicly is going to have staying power, I think. And if you're that already, like the tools are going to change. The art form is going to change, but I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, to come back to something we were saying earlier, in light of everything we've talked about, especially AI and adopting these things, like you were saying, Cirque, like get the computer into your neocortex, you become, as a public figure, as a creative public figure, as you adopt these things and you adapt them into your work right now, or when they just become the thing that does the work in the background for you in 10 years, like a refrigerator, when you bring that to people, whether it's 1,000 people, whether it's 100,000 people, whether it's 1,000,000 people, you become the bridge for normies to nerddom.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, because you're taking the thing that was nerdy and hard and weird, and in the future it will be way less hard and weird and way faster, way more nerdy for sure. And you'll be taking it to people and broadcasting it. And all that you need to do is look cool and be cool and put it out there that it's yours, because it is.
Kanye West didn't produce Donda. Other people produced it. He just made some intelligent choices in that process. And kind of all art is about intelligent choices. It's not about the tool that you're using to make those choices. And so making good choices and curation is like the only true art form. And it will continue to be. You'll still have to make some decisions, make some choices. The main choice that will remain true forever is that like we're the consumers of the productive output of these large language models and AI. We consume it. And so we tell it what we want. Okay. And if you can be the one to tell it what you want in a way that other people didn't even know they wanted it yet, that's no different than what Kanye West did with Donda.
Yeah.
It's just accurate, intelligent choices about where the art's heading and where it should head. So don't be afraid, and certainly don't cope.
No, it's so true. If anything, your artistic choices and preferences and decision making will be better reflected in your art in 10 years than it has ever been reflected in the history of art, in the history of music, in the history of humankind. And that's insane. That's so cool.
Dude, when I'm walking around like this,
you'll be making the best music you've ever made.
You know how like your best song was like something, you were tired, it was 10 p.m. and you were like falling asleep, and then all of a sudden music just starts flooding in your head because all of these like processes for cognition have been shut down, and there's this like creative like voice that just emanates out of you late at night when you're about to fall asleep, and whole songs come into your head out of nowhere seemingly. And the next morning you maybe do a voice note in the bathroom, and then you just go back to sleep. And then the next morning you just try desperately to create it with fidelity how you heard it. Like when I'm walking around like this, that song's going to pop out the second it comes in my head. Or I could even dial down the same things that being tired dials down to be in that creative state all the time without taking any Ambien. And so that's a future that I'm very excited about. And there's lots of reason to be excited if you can get past the like sort of resistance to all this stuff.
Yeah, imagine being able to tap into the flow state whenever you want.
Yeah. Imagine being able to finally get that song out of your head and not F it up on the way, right? Like so much is lost in what comes into our mind's eye and translating that into something other people can see.
How many damaged musical children have gone through my brain and then come out through my hands and mouth days later
just not as good as when they were in your brain, right?
No, definitely not.
Yeah. So I'm excited for that. And it's like, just get over the fact that like you won't be able to give yourself as much credit. Like that's really what the cope is all about, is people are worried that they won't be able to get as much credit for what they do. And it's like, dude, just let go.
You know what's amazing about this? And maybe this is a lesson that we can pass on. It's definitely something that I've learned over the years in business. The less credit that I can take for stuff and give to people on my team or my partners or whatever, or the people that I'm paying to do something, the better.
Yup.
And that is truth when it comes to your art as well. Like, if you've never experienced that with your music, then that says to me you've probably never paid somebody or hired somebody to help you with something. Man, the last song that I released, I handed it off to be mixed to my buddy Carl Bonner. Shout out to Carl. He's the man. He's amazing.
You can get him to mix your next project by going to the Indie Pro deals section, and you can get discounted mixing from him.
Yes, that's true. That's true. We'll link to Indie Pro in the show notes as always. Join our community because you can get your music mixed by amazing mixers like Carl. But having him do that was amazing. I can't say I mixed the music. Do I care? No, I love mixing music, but I don't care. The end result was 100 times better than what I was coming with.
Yeah, like some Kid Punk's music would be cool if we didn't have Dylan McLean, but like compared to what it is, it would kind of suck. Like it wouldn't be what it is, the music that we're able to create. So yeah, like think about how often you foist the responsibility of making your music truly great onto people who don't even live near you. like is it that much better that you did that versus foisting it onto
a robot in your brain?
Exactly.
I love this. This was so much fun, dude.
Lots of fun. Yeah.
Well, I hope you guys dug this future telling. I don't know. Are we mediums now?
Yeah, dude.
Are we fortune tellers? I don't know. This was fun. I hope you guys dug it. I hope this was inspiring. It was inspiring for me.
Hell yeah.
Well, we'll catch you guys next time on Creative Juice. And as we're wrapping up here, listen to For Granted by Alice D. Maselli. She's one of our Indie X clients, one of our Indie Founder students, and she's an amazing Indie Awards winner from inside the Indie Pro community. So check out her music, join us in the community, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace out.
Please don't take my love for granted. I'll give you all I've